This is the Oracle Podcast with Ben Moa. All right, welcome back to another episode. We're a few episodes in, so I think it's time for me to bring some clarity to the name of this podcast. It's called the Oracle because the Oracle is a scientific name for your ear, and that's all I really wanted this podcast to be about. And I have to give a really huge shout out to one of my closest friends, Richard Gray. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have this name for the podcast. This guy is a visionary, and he just really was inspired to share with me this possibility of a name, and I hopped on that real quick because it made sense. I just want this podcast to be something that people can listen to, connect with, and be able to hear other people's stories as they connect with your own. So thanks, Rich. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have this name for this podcast. I don't even know what else I'd call it. Maybe Ben's podcast. I don't know, something random. So thank you so much for this unique name that will live forever in this podcast. Today's episode is with Demia. You'll be meeting her soon, and she comes from Bermuda, but she's at Birmingham University right now, and she'll be sharing her story on leadership and her experience of leadership and the blessing and burden it is sometimes. So stay tuned, and I hope you guys enjoy the show.
Hi, my name is Demia. I'm a student leader on Birmingham University campus.
Yeah, and Demia, what are some of the things since your first year that you've had the chance to take a part of here at this university?
Well, in first year, I did drama, and then my second year, I was kind of laid back. But then when I came into third year, I decided to do SWAT, which is the Student Welcome Affirming Team, and the president of the Birmingham Black Student Alliance. So, and gospel choir here and there, like light praise team, that type of stuff too. But yeah.
Okay, and you've been a part of a lot since your time. This year in your what year? What year are you in? Third year?
Third year, yeah.
Third year, and so you're a leader.
Yes.
Yeah, you're a leader. Don't be shy. You're
Yes.
a leader, and you're someone of influence here at this university. And I think the whole episode, the concept of this episode is the difference between someone who's a leader and who's a follower. And so when do you think your first time in your life where you had to be a leader? What was the first situation? Do you remember?
I don't remember when it first happened, but I know from childhood I was definitely a leader. I had two brothers growing up with me in the house that I was in, and my oldest brother and I used to do all the talking for not my younger brother, but the younger of the two. And he was older than me, but I had a mouthpiece. Like, I used to say, oh, this is what he wants, this is what we're doing. And that was from young, and I never lied about how I felt. I told my mom, like, if I don't like the color of this, I don't like it. And that was from childhood. So I always knew I wasn't afraid to speak up and stand out. So I guess leadership qualities showed from young. So, yeah.
Okay. And why are you driven to be a leader?
I don't know. I just have this drive in me that doesn't allow me to just sit there. Like, I feel guilty sometimes if I just sit there and don't do something. Like, I spent my whole second year just chilling or just staying laid back. And I felt like I wasn't doing what I needed to do. And sometimes there's been people that say something that makes me feel like, shoot, maybe I need to do something. I know one of my friends, her mom had came and she saw me at my high school, Kingsway. And she had said, when I came here in second year, she saw me and she said, are you a leader at the school? And I was like, no. Like, she was like, you're not president of something? Like, what are you doing? And I was like, nothing right now. Like, I'm just chilling. And like, she was kind of disappointed. And I realized, like, shoot, people actually notice if I don't fulfill the role I was told to do or driven to do. So yeah, if that makes sense.
And so you came from Bermuda.
Yes.
And you were an immigrant to Canada.
Pretty much.
Straight up. And you came, wait, what grade were you in?
I came in grade 9.
Came grade 9. You went to Kingsway straight.
Yes, for 4 years.
Okay, so when did you start doing leadership at Kingsway?
So at first I was scared to run because I'd been rejected in middle school and primary school when I tried to run for things. But someone had told me to run for class president in grade 9, failed. sometimes it's not your time to be a leader. And they had chosen someone else because they had known her. She was valedictorian in their middle school, so it made sense. Like, they knew her, so they said, okay, we'll choose her. And then I guess people had seen my leadership skills during the year when I had spoken up about things or said something to people about how I felt. And they said, okay, well, grade 10, we'll choose her as leader. So that was when I started leading in school, if that makes sense.
Okay, and so what did that look like for you? Like, what did it mean to be a leader, or what choices did you have to make, etc.?
It was definitely hard for me at first because not everybody likes a leader. And my personality sometimes can come off as strong or intimidating. And a lot of people don't get the chance to know me personally, like one-on-one. So they don't know that if they needed help, they could come to me like one-on-one. But I tried to make sure that I portrayed myself as someone they could come to not only as a leader, but as a friend. But it was hard because if you do that too often, people try to take advantage of you or use you. But I found it easier in the end of grade 10 or so. Like, I had learned skills like making sure I was on time for things so people took me seriously. Like, I made sure I was there like 10 minutes earlier than everybody else. I made sure that I was organized when I came to things. I acted professional. And you would think like in grade 10, okay, that's extra. But I made sure like when people asked me to do things, I actually did it well. I made sure I was on Senate so that people knew I had a voice. You know what I mean? So I had to shape how I looked, if that makes sense. So that's how I kind of learned how to do the role. And I also asked for help from people above me. So yeah, so that's pretty much the way it looked for me. It was kind of hard though because you're in high school. People have opinions. People are kind of mean sometimes. But lucky for me, I didn't like have a bully or anything. But sometimes I found it hard because people would say things behind your back, or people would attack you because you're in a position where everybody can see you. So it wasn't always easy, but there were like good and bad parts. So yeah.
And so then, how do you like in that? Like, you listed some good things that are difficult about being a leader. People not always being on your same page as you, people kind of just talking poorly about you just because you're a leader.
Yeah.
You know, how do you maneuver on that? Like, how do you continue to serve people when you know they don't always see you in the best light?
Sometimes it hurts, but you have to keep it pushing because no matter what position you're in, whether you're a leader or not a leader, it doesn't matter. People are going to have something to say regardless. And for the most part, it was good for me. Most people had positive things to say. And there was the odd people that would be like, oh, well, we don't like what you're doing here and there. But because of those good people and that good energy I was getting, it was okay for me to kind of, take a step back and realize, it's okay. You're still a good leader. Just because people don't like a decision you made or you made a mistake along the way, it doesn't make you any less of a strong leader. You know what I mean? So it's how you handle the situations, and it's how you have the mindset of pushing forward and saying, I still got to do what I got to do. Because people don't like every leader. And there's people that like you or don't like you. And there's been times in the Bible, in history, that people were leaders and there was majority of people that hated them. But they still did what they have to do. And I'm not saying like I was a perfect leader, but I know I did the best that I could for the time that I was given and the position I was given. So yeah.
Is there any leaders that you kind of look up to, or is there anyone that comes to mind when you think of exemplary leaders?
Do they have to be like famous or anybody?
Anyone.
Okay.
Anyone.
Well, I had a couple people in my life personally. My mom, there's qualities, because it's not that I necessarily look at a person as a leader like in general. I look at the qualities they possess that I would want to see in myself as a leader. So my mom, she's very strong. Like, she perseveres through a lot of things. Like, there's a lot of things she's been through that if I was to go through them, like, I'd be done. I looked at her perseverance. My grandmother, basically, she's my great-great-aunt, but I knew her as a grandmother. She took care of generations after generations after generations. Like, she took random people's kids in her house. She took family in her house and raised them. And she basically raised me. So there's people like I look around to that were my family members and people around me. I look at them as leaders. So those two are the like main people in my life that I would see as people I look to as leaders, because my mom's the head of the household for me, and she was the head of, my grandma was the head of the household for a lot of the generation. So those are the two people I look up to. But obviously you have like Yara. Do you know like Yara, from Blackish?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I look up to her. I look up to her as a young leader. Like, she's a young Black woman. Mm-hmm. And the things she's doing, the position she's taken, not just as an actress, but she also acts as an activist. She's very inspiring when it comes to being young. Because it's scary being young because people act like you don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So I look up to her. Obviously, like, I'll look up to Obama for life. I'm sorry. Like, no one understands what he felt on that day when he became president. And for me, like, that's such an amazing thing to be a black man taking a position that was not meant for you type thing. You know what I mean? Like, people saw it as like, whoa, like, you're not supposed to be there. And like, I don't know, I look at him always. So, you know, like, there's people that I'll look at also in like history, like Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman. The basic answers, my bad for being cliche, but those are people I look up to as well. So yeah.
Okay, so leaders and followers are two different people. And it's not bad to be a follower, it's not bad to be a leader.
Yeah.
But what do you think it makes the difference between the two?
Well,
like, kind of like, I guess what I'm asking is like, yeah, like, how did you know you weren't either or? Like, what do you think what keeps you from becoming a follower? Like, what are your traits or anything that you know?
there's been times where I had to be a follower, because even as leader, you have to do both sometimes, because there's other leaders. And sometimes I have to take a step back and, you know, take orders and do whatever I need to do. But I do believe that both are important, because if you didn't have followers, who are you leading? You know what I mean? So both are important, so I don't want anybody to think, like you said, there's no bad like in either. But the thing that differentiates them is that the followers are ready to listen. They're ready for you to say, you know, this is what's happening. No, they might not always like it, but they're there to listen. They're there to help you. They're ready when you're ready to delegate. Those are the people that will help you as a leader. And the difference between them and a leader is usually that the leader's not afraid to say what they need to say. Sometimes it's hard. I'm not going to lie. There's been times where I was like, I'm not about to say anything. Lord, just let me be quiet. You know what I mean? Like, let me just conform real quick. But there are times when, as a leader, you can't stop yourself. There's this urge in you that says, like, no, I have to do something, or something's wrong. Like, there's been times where someone was saying something to someone, and in my head I was like, okay, Demir, just let it pass. And then something said, nah, you gotta speak up, because if you don't speak up, there's no one gonna speak up, and you don't know what could happen. So I think that's the difference between them. There's something kind of in each different role. Like, there's something in the leader that says, like, this is what you have to do, and you have to, you know, delegate, or you have to say something. And then there's something in the follower that says, what do you need me to do? You know what I mean? So, yeah, yes. I think that's a difference.
I think actually I agree with that. I never thought about that. I think in leaders, it's like they get that nudge to do certain things, and then they act on it.
It hurts, you know? Like, it's a nudge that don't go away.
Have you ever not acted on the nudge?
I can't really think of a time where I haven't done something. I mean, but sometimes you might confuse it as not a nudge. But most of the time I can say, because just because I can't recall, it doesn't mean that I haven't had a moment where I turned it down. But I know there was times where I battled, like, with doing something. Like, even the very moment where I became more spiritual in high school, because I grew up around Seventh-day Adventist, but I wasn't really fully Seventh-day Adventist. So when I went to Kingsway, it was like, whoa, you know, like, it's a Seventh-day Adventist school. I have to go to church all the time, worship. And I remember being in a worship room, and the Holy Spirit was tugging on my heart, and I was like, nah, be good. And like, even people who aren't leaders, like, will get that tug, you know what I mean? But like, something said something's different about this time. So I had felt like a tug that said stand up during the praise team song. And I remember telling God, nah. Like, I was like, nah, it's embarrassing. Everyone's sitting down in this school, and you want me to stand up in the middle of a song? I was like, okay, you know what? Next song. So I was hoping, you know, they were done singing. I was like hoping like this was the end of the set, and I was like, God, don't make there be a next song. I was like, yeah, next song I'll stand up. And then like the next song like was in a part, and I was like, shoot, I already said I'm gonna stand up. I said, okay. I looked to my left, looked to my right, and like I stood up, and like tears started coming down my eyes. I was so embarrassed, like, because I didn't want to stand up, like, and even though I'm a leader, it's still embarrassing to do things, to stand out, to sing, to perform, you know what I mean? Like, any of those things is really scary. And I stood up, and I didn't even care. I put my hands in my eyes, and I just started crying. And someone, like, in front of me, I'll never forget, her name was Samantha, and she looked back, and she said, like, she double took it. She said, Damia? And I was like, yeah. She was like, everybody's standing up behind you. Did you just, like, stand up? And I was like, oh, my gosh. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, there was a moment then where, like, I had debated with it. And I was like, you know, part of me is not going to do it, but part of me is. And, like, from that moment, I know that when there's a tug that tells me to do something, like, even with joining BBSA, Rhoda was that tug, if you know Rhoda, my ex-roommate or old roommate. She had pushed me to do it. You know what I mean? So sometimes it comes in the form of an urge. Sometimes it comes in the form of a person. But I don't recall a time where I actually like turned it down. So yeah.
What do you think, what would you tell people who want to kind of turn down those urges?
I can't really tell them not to turn it down, because some people will decide that and their calling will come later on, or they'll feel that urge later on again, or it'll be passed to someone else. You never know. If there's a job that God needs to get done, or that something needs to happen, it'll be passed to whoever needs to get it done. But I would say the joy you feel after saying yes to that urge is way more fulfilling than the guilt you'll feel from saying no. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's hard. And what I would say is to ask people around you, like, or people who've done it before you, what did you do? Or how do I accept this urge even though I'm nervous, or I feel like I can't do it, or I feel like I'm not worthy? Because being a leader doesn't mean you always feel like you're fit for the job, and it doesn't always mean that you feel safe or happy or like you can do something. You know what I mean? It comes, and it's not always perfect, but you'll understand once you complete the task that, wow, you know, maybe I was meant for this. You know what I mean? So
yeah. And now just to kind of change a little bit of the direction of it, still on the same topic of leadership. Yeah. A big thing is when you're a leader, all eyes are on you, whether you're on the stage or off the stage, whenever you're presenting something or not. Yeah, that's kind of hard. Yeah. Do you think that there are standards that leaders need to have, or how do you determine that? Like, how do you know, or should you be like, you know what, I'm still a person, doesn't matter? Like, what do you do?
It's easy to say, like, oh, I'm still a person, I'm human, like, let me do what I want to do. But in the same way, I know for me, the person looking up to me the most is my baby sister. And I can say I'm a human being to her all I want, but she looks up to me with standards higher than she would look to you or to someone down the street. You know what I mean? So as a leader, you have to think of it like that. People are looking to you at a different standard already. And the way you present yourself is how people accept you or know you to be. And that's the impression they'll have for life. You know what I mean? When you do something negative, it usually outweighs the positive you do. You know what I mean? It's just how we work sometimes. And yeah, you might be doing 1,000 good things, but as soon as you mess up, people notice. And I knew that when I was younger, I had a bad like attitude problem, and I had like a big mouth. And, you know, I used to say things when I shouldn't have said them. I used to act aggressive in a way that I shouldn't. And when I became a leader, I realized that wasn't okay. Like, I realized even though I might say something right, the way I do it is how people perceive that I am. Like, it's the way they'll think my character is. So I had to make sure, okay, well, when you have something to say it in a different type of way. Say it in a way where it'll get across to people, not as you're being this big bad wolf, but that you're, you know, trying to say something that you feel is necessary to say. So it's all in how you present yourself, because yes, I'm a human, and yes, I make mistakes, but people are always going to look up to you as a standard. And the way you want them to see you is as a confident, well thought out, like, leader. What's the word for well thought out? What's the word when somebody's, they think things through?
Methodical? Or?
No, like, you think things before you say something. When you think before you speak. It's like, okay, well, you know what I mean. Somebody like, oh, she thought before she spoke. Like, she wasn't ready to just attack. That type of thing. And yes, I'll make mistakes. But also the way people look at you after you make that mistake is important as well. So there's been times where I said something that was kind of, you know, shady, or I said something that was with attitude, and I was like, okay, shoot, no, let me backtrack. I'm sorry I said it that way. What I meant was this, and I didn't mean to say it in that type of way. So you know what I mean? So anytime I do make a mistake, I have to make sure that the way I carry myself after the fact is a way that people will respect. Because they respect that you make mistakes. They respect that you're human, but don't misuse that and abuse that type thing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that's what I say, if that makes sense.
That's powerful. No, that's really, really applicable, I think, to people who are in leadership. Mm-hmm. I think another thing that people struggle with is likability, like how much people like them as leaders. Because, you know, as a leader, you're leading people, like you said. There's no people, what are you doing? But what if in your leading, you make a choice and people don't like it, or they seem not to like you, or they're offended by you or something like that? Mm-hmm. How do you move on? How do you continue leading?
I have to recognize where I fall short, and I have to recognize where I messed up, because sometimes I'll make a decision that I thought was right in the moment, and maybe I didn't really run it by people. It might be okay, but it might also fail, and I have to go back and say, like, humble myself and walk to them and say, I'm sorry I did this. I'm sorry I offended you. You know what I mean? It boils down to the fact that I am human, and I may have made a miscall or a misjudgment, and I may have stepped ahead of the gun, or you know what I mean? Like, I might have taken a misstep here and there, and I feel like people understand that about me. So I've always had people manage to be okay with the mistakes I've made or the errors I've made. But when it comes to people that are offended by me, I've had people say, oh, you're annoying or intimidating or things like that. And when they say stuff like that, it does get to you. Like, at first it's like, okay, ouch, like that hurt. And some people don't like the style you have as a person. So it's like, you have to understand them. So, you know, you have to talk to those people and say, well, I'm sorry, did I rub you the wrong way? What is it about me that gets to you, or what did offend you? You know what I mean? So I have to kind of see that each of the people you're leading has a voice. They have a mind, they have an opinion, they have a heart. You know what I mean? So I have to understand each of the people in this group. And sometimes I might step on a toe. I don't know if you took the personality test that gives you like an animal or assigns you like an animal. I got lion. So imagine a lion talking to a golden retriever. I definitely sometimes am blunt. So a lot of people that are softer or smoother when it comes to giving messages and stuff, or beat around the bush easier, they might be offended by some of the things I've said as a leader in the past. So when I try to say like, oh, do this, this, and that, and you fail doing this, I'm just being straightforward because that's what I would want. So I have to understand each person. So that's where I can avoid the issue of offending people. And sometimes I'll make mistakes. Sometimes it's hard for me to learn how to talk to everyone, because when you're a leader, you're not just leading two people most of the time. So I'd say it's hard to kind of not offend people, but you can find ways around it by not being ignorant, by educating yourself, understanding the people around you, and also by when you are wrong or when you're trying to get to know people in general, make sure you're not always just leading. Make sure you're also, you know, talking to them as a friend sometimes. Like, I know it might be hard for some people, but they'll still respect you when you come to them and say, hey, I know you have a sister that was sick today. Like, is she okay? Like, do you need help? Like, do you need tea sent to her? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, reaching out to them as people, not as just followers or something, that also can help. So I don't know if that answers your question. But
oh, that does. That does. Well, thanks so much, Damia. In closing, what would you tell people who are struggling with leadership, struggling to find their identity as a leader, to be bold in their leadership? What did you learn? What would you tell someone else?
I'd say it's hard to compare yourself to people. I know it's hard to be a teenager, hard to be a post-millennial in general. A lot of us have a lot of people telling us a lot of ways to be. No matter how many times you change yourself, no matter how many times you change the way you think, there's always going to be at least 2 or 3 people who disagree with it. I just found out that in high school, I found out that it was way more expensive to try to please everybody when it comes to money and your mental health. I found that when I was trying to please all the people back home, because they're very, first of all, fashion forward, and they have like this style that I didn't perfectly match. And I found myself trying to buy the clothes, found myself trying to make sure I was up to date with them. And I realized like I still was behind. So you know what I mean? So trying to do that became too expensive. So I'd say to people, honestly, don't compare yourself to people who bleed the same as you, breathe the same as you. You know what I mean? They're all human. At the end of the day, do what makes you happy. Not in like the cliche way, but I just mean like in a way where you're not living your life to please people who don't need to, who don't add any contributions to your life, don't benefit you in any way. I would say that, I don't know, be confident, but also recognize your weaknesses, because when you recognize your strengths and weaknesses, you understand who you are as a person, you understand how you work, and you understand what you need to do moving forward. So that's a benefit as a leader. And lastly, I'd say get to know yourself more. I'd say in learning your strengths and weaknesses, in learning not to compare yourself, you might love yourself a little bit more, understand the parts of you that you find attractive and not attractive. You know what I mean? Because honestly, we're not going to say we're perfect. But like, notice like, hey, Damia, I like your lips today. You know, that lip gloss is popping. You know what I mean? Like, give yourself compliments here and there. Like, that will lift you up, because other people are always going to put you down. You know what I mean? So just be you. That's cliche to say, but, you know, it's true. Be you. Because honestly, there's only one you. You know what I mean? That's what people always say, but it's true. There's only one you, and you can't really be anybody else. And everybody else has their own struggles they're going through as well. So don't try to think that these people are on a pedestal just because they might be more popular than you. So that's pretty much my advice I would give.
And that's a wrap on this episode. Thanks to Mia. You guys can find her on her social media. Search up Mia _DUHMEEYUH. Find her up. If you want to know how to spell her name, it's in the bio. And follow her. She actually has such great ideas and such a big vision for the year 2019. So stay tuned on her pages to see how she's going to do that. We have one more episode before we start our official series of the Auricle Podcast. So stay tuned. We have another episode coming up real soon here. And I know you guys will like it. Thank you guys so much for all the support so far. And thanks for all the love. Stay blessed. Till next time.